Not all probiotics are created equal. New Purina Systemic Supplement remains live and active after the pelleting process and throughout the digestive system, making it all the way to the hind gut. Systemic was designed to support normal recovery after exercise and occasional gastrointestinal stress. Whether you're using a probiotic now or not, it's time to use a live and active supplement from a name you trust. Visit mq.purinamills.com to try Purina Systemic Probiotic Supplement today. Are you a horse owner? Get exclusive discounts on brands like John Deere and Big Ass Fans with equine discounts. If you're a paying member of any equine association, you qualify. And as an added bonus, a percentage of every sale through equine discounts is returned to the equine industry. Go to equinediscounts.com to receive your discounts. You're listening to Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family. Welcome to Sleep Stories for Equestrians. I'm your host, Ashley Winch. We're so happy you're here to relax and unwind. If you fall asleep and miss the story, we will recap it at the beginning of the next episode. We've also selected and edited these stories for ultimate relaxation, removing any stressful bits without affecting the story's integrity, so you can focus on drifting off to sleep. With that, let's settle down and prepare for our story. The gates are closed, the horses sleep, the day's work done, the chores complete. Now let us rest, our bodies and minds. Drift off to sleep and close your eyes. It's time for us to turn down for the night. Now let's breathe in, breathe out, and turn off the light. One more time. Breathe out, breathe in. Now, let us begin. On the last episode of Sleep Stories for Equestrians, the elf learned all about English dogs hunting in the countryside. Tonight, we will begin the next chapter. Invicta gives the elf further information. One morning, not long after my talk with Clasper, Lord and Lady Durand passed the park gates in their smart little carriage, to which the Dandy and Zarina were harnessed, tandem fashion, just as Master and I were going out for our usual exercise. The great show day was drawing very near, and we were all growing most excited about it. When Lord Durand saw us, he pulled up and tried to talk to Master, but the Dandy wouldn't stand still, not even for a moment, and I really believe it was simply because he couldn't. The day was very hot, and the numberless flies mercilessly tortured his poor, unprotected body. Master jumped out of the light cart to which I was harnessed, and went and stood by the Dandy's head. He talked to him soothingly, and gently stroked his proud and beautiful neck. But I saw that Master's kind words and loving caresses, the panacea to all troubles in our stables, could not make the fine, highly strung Dandy forget, no, not even momentarily, the misery of his sufferings. With shortened mane and only a stump for a tail, the poor animal was absolutely defenseless against the furious onslaught of the many relentless insects buzzing about on that hot summer day, driving him nearly mad from irritation and pain by their persistent attacks. It was impossible for my master and dandies to have any conversation, for try as he could, my poor friend could not stand still, and Zarina was quite restive too, though she was not quite as sensitive as her poor friend Dandy. I wondered whatever would happen on the show day, for the Dandy's nerves were in such an incessant state of irritation that he seemed quite deaf to anything his master said to him. With an impatient movement of reins, Lord Duran drove on, and Master came to me and patted my back. He praised me and called me good for waiting so quietly for him to come to me again. I nestled my head on his shoulder and tried to explain that of course it was quite easy for me to stand still, for my head, neck, and body were well protected from onslaughts by a fly net, and my tail, uninjured by the hand of man, was quite capable of stunning and driving away any flies which were silly enough to think they would find a resting place on my legs. Master pressed his dear hands lovingly against me in response to the explanation I had tried to neigh to him, and he fingered my forelock, said in a voice full of sympathy and pity, "Oh, Elf, you don't know what poor Dandy has suffered, and all he still has to bear from the flies, with only that housemaid's brush of a tail, all he has left with which to defend himself from their cruel and perpetual bites and stings." I neighed. "I think I do understand a little, Master, for the Dandy told me only the other day all about the docking of his tail." I know, Elf," answered Master in his understanding, sympathetic way, and after letting his face rest against mine for a moment, he gathered up my reins, and we started off for our drive. When Master brought me home again, and I was cozily settled into my beautiful box, and I shared the day's story with Invicta, who said, "Isn't it a dreadful story, Elf?" Invicta's indignation was as great as my own, and I had to wait patiently for her to quiet the memories my comments had renewed before I could put my further questions to her. Then I said, "Please, Invicta, will you tell me all you can about the other reasons which people, when questioned, give as excuses for having their horses docked, besides the truly contemptible one, as in the case of Dandy, which comes under the degradingly pretty heading, 'Is it fashion?'" "Gladly," answered my friend, "but I will tell you in the very beginning that not one of them will bear investigation or stand in the searching in the light of truth, and in a great majority of cases the offenders are obliged to take refuge, if indeed a refuge can be found, in the deplorable reply of an unforgivable ignorance. It is the custom. I want to know just everything you can tell me, Invicta, on this subject, for I, in my turn, want to tell the humans of the world and obtain their help in abolishing once and for all this cruel practice. And of course I must be quite fair. If the supporters of docking have even one leg to stand upon, I must not be the one to take it away. For generally speaking, humans are very just and very fair." "If they haven't a leg to stand upon," sharply replied Invicta, "it is only kept upright by laziness, thoughtlessness, and selfishness, as I am sure you will see, dear Elf, as I go on. Perhaps the chief reason put forth for docking a horse's tail is that it is much cleaner, but of course we all know this reason is simply an excuse for laziness. It is quite easy for a groom to plait the long hair of the tail and tie it up when the weather is gritty, if it reaches anywhere near the ground. Here, Invicta gave her own beautiful tail a significant swish in the air, and I gazed admiringly at her, for she has the handsomest and longest tail of all my friends. But, continued Invicta, most grooms and stable lads try to persuade their masters that docked tails are absolutely necessary, simply because they are too lazy to spend on the most faithful and enduring friend of man the little extra time and attention a long tail requires. I am surprised, Invicta, I answered, that any educated man who gives the subject a thought can be made to believe such an erroneous statement. Besides, even if it were true, surely there is some other remedy more humane and more merciful than depriving poor horses of their tails. Of course there is, Elf, and a very simple remedy too, for all the long hairs can be cut short right up to the end of the bone, making it what is known as a bang tail. I have heard my master say that the late Queen Victoria had many of her horses' tails treated in this way. Of course, cutting the hair like this takes away from the natural beauty of the tail and makes it not quite so easy for the horse to swish off troublesome flies, but it does not injure the tail, and this is a very great reason in its favor. Moreover, when the horse is turned out to grass, the hair soon grows fresh. Once a horse is deprived of its tail, he has no power of growing it again, and whatever his lot in life may be, he has from henceforth to bear the torment of flies, and it is agony to him to be turned out to grass in the hot weather, and his, in most cases, well-earned rest is only a time of misery and pain. A docked mare can never be a really good mother, for she and her foal should practically live outdoors, and if the mother is exposed to the mercy of the flies, she could be quite unable to feed her little foal, and it could only grow up feeble and delicate. Here, Invicta paused to take a breath, and dear mother looked tenderly at Eros and me, and then Invicta said, having noticed mother's loving glance at us, "Yes, dear Lady Beechwood, you may certainly be very proud of your two beautiful children." Another very ignorant reason given by many people for docking horses, continued Invicta, is that the operation strengthens the backbone. Now how in the name of common sense could this possibly be? Angrily asked Invicta, almost glaring at us in her indignation. Dear Invicta, I said, you look at us as though we approved of such barbarity, and I can assure you we are all feeling just as keenly on the subject as you are. I'm sorry, Elf, but I do feel so furious when I think of the stupidity of such a reason, and indeed, if there were a particle of truth in the idea, wouldn't all poor horses, if given any voice in the matter, gladly bear this imaginary weakness of the back, rather than the terribly realistic misery the poor docked tail brings with it? The other day, I heard your man Ricketts tell Master's groom that 2 men had been fined, one 5 pounds and the other 2 pounds, for docking a horse in such a matter. Dreadful and cruel as the operation is, even when performed on foals, words cannot express the degrading brutality of its being allowed to be performed on horses, when all the bones are fixed and set. People like your master and mine are asking daily, why aren't there laws against docking? There is a law against causing animals unnecessary suffering, but it is not yet recognized that docking is unnecessary. Life is hard and strenuous for the greater number of horses, but it is rendered 1,000 times harder for them by the master who allows them to be docked. And it is humiliating in the extreme to realize that in England men are allowed to dock horses' tails as their lives are drawing to a close, in order to secure an entirely imaginary increase of strength in their poor, enduring backs. In the case quoted, the owners had most just reward, For he who looks after the tiny sparrow and giveth life to all, in his far-seeking mercy took back the life he had given to these poor creatures, and left its owners not only horseless, but having to pay a fine as well, which in my master's opinion was too small. And I am sure, dear elf, your master will agree with mine. I should just think he will, I answered. There are still one or two more foolish reasons which people give as an excuse for docking, but I must tell you about them, and the next time I come to see you all, said Invicta, for I can hear my master's voice, and I expect that means he is nearly ready for me to take him home. Then, as Ricketts led her off, we called out, "Goodbye, Invicta," and begged her to come again as soon as she could. Eros, Mother, and I were much interested in all we now knew on the subject of docking, and I felt more keen than ever to impart my knowledge to humans in the world, for I know that they will want to help our cause when they thoroughly understand its object, which, to put briefly, is to make the docking of horses, once and for all, an illegal practice. Thank you for joining me and the elf as she tells us stories about her friends. Enjoy this calm, meditative music as it carries you off to dreamland.